So good afternoon, everybody. It's 12 o'clock now, so we'll get started. I hope that you're all keeping well and safe. For today's webinar, we're going to be looking at making the probationary period work for you, your business, your employees, as part of the onboarding process. I often get asked questions about the need for a probationary period for new starters. They are a vital part of the employee onboarding experience and can also help to set expectations, which in turn impacts on the employee performance. Equally, if an employee isn't working out, it's better to deal efficiently rather than letting too much time pass. Also, if you've used recruitment agencies, often there is a clause within the contract that they can replace, whether that's for free or a reduced rate within the first 3 months. So yeah, it is an important process to have in place. For those of you that are new to our webinars, this is the Clover HR team. Between us, we have over 200 years of experience. And Clover are your trusted people advisors, but we do also have specialists within our team in recruitment, learning and development, coaching, health and safety, and also CV writing. So my name is Leanne Porter and I'm a HR business partner for Clover HR. I have 10 years HR experience working within SMEs across a range of sectors, so from IT to farming and also retail. My contact details are up on the screen at the moment and will also be available at the end of the webinar should you need to get in contact or if you have any questions following today's session. Hopefully I have muted your microphones, and do ask that you do keep your microphones muted throughout the session, just to try and help keep the background noise to a minimum for those that are listening. So let's look at what we're going to be covering today. So firstly, I'll cover off the purpose of the probation period. Then I'll go over the employee rights whilst on probation. We'll look at how to make the probation period work for you and your business. And then finally, I'll cover off how to extend probation periods before moving on to some questions we've already been sent in ahead of today's session. So first of all, let's look at what is a probation period. So essentially, a probation period is the time at the start of employment, which is for a fixed amount of time, typically between 3 to 6 months in length, generally dependent on the role, when an employee may be dismissed with either little or no notice if they are found to be unsuitable for the role. And essentially, it can be seen as an extension or a safety net for employers after the recruitment stage is complete. I've been in interviews myself where you believe you found the right candidate for the role and the company, and then on day one, it feels like somebody else has turned up to the job. It's not uncommon within the first few weeks of employment for an employer to discover a new employee either doesn't deliver the skills or performance they promised at an interview, maybe has poor timekeeping or attendance, or just a bad fit in terms of personality or organisational culture. And the probation period allows employers to dismiss a new employee, like I said, with little or no notice if they're not suitable for the role. And as much as I've been talking about an employer assessing whether an employee is right for a company and role, the probation period also allows the employee to assess whether the role and organisation is right for them. So the purpose of the probation period is for a new employee to demonstrate their ability to meet the desired performance levels for the role they have been recruited for. It provides a new employee with expectations of what is expected of them, improving the onboarding experience, engagement of the new employee, and ensuring they get the required training to hit the ground running. Probation periods give an employee the opportunity to assess new employees on the job, like I said, for a fixed amount of time, and it helps employers to ensure they have made the right recruiting decision and to take action more quickly if they feel a new starter isn't suitable for the role. Probation periods also allow for the employee to manage the relationship more flexibly, so you can address problems effectively and efficiently. So employees on probation won't have worked for you long enough to qualify for unfair dismissal protection. However, they are entitled to some employee rights, which include the national minimum wage, time off in line with the Working Time Directive, statutory sick pay, family-related leave, and also statutory notice. They also hold the right to protection against automatically unfair dismissal and unlawful discrimination. And therefore, it's important to have evidence to demonstrate that your reasons for dismissal are fair and non-discriminatory. So, for example, probation review meetings targets are not being met, evidence of poor attendance, things like that. Employees on probation are protected against harassment and dismissal for protected reasons, so things such as age, gender, disability, religion or cultural background. Protection is also provided against wrongful dismissal, which can occur during the probation period if the employer fails to follow the contractual dismissal process. So if you weren't to give the contractual notice period. So you're probably wondering what is different. What employers can offer during the probation period is less generous contractual terms. So for example, an employee on probation may not have access to full benefits such as bonuses, share schemes, or private medical care. Employees are also likely to be on much shorter notice periods until the probationary period has passed, generally a week, and can be beneficial if you need to terminate the employment. Employees do not have the right to claim unfair dismissal for most situations, including in relation to misconduct or poor performance. This is because employees need to have 2 years employment with the same employer in order to make a qualifying claim. So moving on to look at how you can make the probation period work for you. Each employer is different, and I would suggest implementing an onboarding and probation review process which reflects both the company's culture and branding. However, there are some steps all employees can look to follow when setting up probation periods as part of a process. So let the new employee know what you expect of them within their role and set them realistic and measurable targets. Provide training and support to allow them to develop the skills they need to fulfill their role. Use regular review meetings. I would say at least once per month to address any arising issues or concerns, and just generally to see how a new employee is getting on. Ensure end of probation review meetings are booked and actioned before the end of the review period. If you don't, the new employee will automatically pass their probation period by default, entitling them to longer notice periods and potentially other contractual rights or benefits that are in place. And end the probation period with a review meeting and take appropriate action. So confirming the employee's role, extending the probation period or terminating the employment, whichever is the necessary action. Clover HR can support in implementing probation periods, whether that's setting goals, reviewing performance, and also following up with employees as required. So now moving on to look at extending probation periods. So you may decide you need to extend an employee's probation period because there hasn't been sufficient time to review their capabilities. This could also be appropriate in cases where the employee has been absent from the workplace for an extended period during the probation due to circumstances beyond the employee's control. So, for example, it might be that they've been on furlough leave for a period of months in light of the current pandemic we're in. If you do decide to extend a probation period, then it must be communicated in writing before the end of the probation period. As an employer, you should clearly document the expectations required of the employee during the extension period, making sure they understand what they must achieve or demonstrate over the coming weeks. And you should ensure to offer additional training or support the employee needs in order to meet the desired expectations of the role. And as before, keep monitoring their performance during the period. And remember to close off the probation at the end of the extended review period or dismiss the employee if they are unsuitable, and follow up with the appropriate paperwork confirming the outcome. It's not unusual to suddenly see performance improve significantly following a formal review, as the employee grasps the seriousness of the situation. So it can be worth just providing employees with a final opportunity for them to prove themselves. However, it's not advisable to make extending the probation periods the norm within your company. An extension should be agreed only if there are special factors that can justify it. So just in summary of what I've just covered off, probation periods are a period of time at the start of the employment relationship, typically between 3 to 6 months, depending on the type of role and the organisational culture. There are no set rules on the length of time that you can set, but an employer just needs to be able to justify why it is the length it is. Probation periods allow an employee to manage the relationship more flexibly, so problems can be addressed efficiently and effectively. It's important to make the probation period work for you and your company to get the most out of it, making sure it fits with the company's culture and ethos. You can extend probation periods if required. However, you need to make sure you have informed the employee before the end of their probation period and set clear expectations during the extended period. You should also consider any additional training or support that may be required, but you can limit contractual terms whilst they're on probation. And finally, I think it's important to remember employees on probation don't have any fewer statutory employment rights than those who have passed probation, and they are still within the first 2 years of a job. So, for example, the right to national minimum wage. So now moving on to some questions which we've had in prior to today's session. So the first one is, do you have to give notice during the probation period? Or another question we get asked quite frequently is, surely I can just dismiss during an employee during the probation period? So during the probation period, both the employer and the employee must give notice in line with what is agreed within their contract of employment. So that may vary, but it must be no less than the statutory notice period, which is 1 week following the first month of employment. Failure to give adequate notice could lead to claims of wrongful dismissal. So it is important that you are given the correct notice period depending on what is in the contract. So another question, can I keep extending the probation period if I'm still unsure, and if so, for how long? So here there is no set legislation on extending probation periods. However, I would encourage employers to think about how this would look in front of an employment tribunal, and also as a reflection of the company and its culture. It may be that you have agreed to review the probation period on a month-by-month basis, up to a maximum of 3 months, which I would see as a fair continuous extension of the probation period, month on month, for a total of 3 months. However, if an employee has gone through an original probational period of 3 or even 6 months, and then this has been extended further by 3 months, I would argue that 6 to 9 months should have been adequate time for the employer to have addressed the employee's capabilities to fulfil their role. And ask that by extending the probation period, what is the employer looking to achieve? And is the employee likely to be able to turn it around? That said, you may have situations where the employee has been unable to attend work for a significant period of time for you to assess their performance. So, for example, if an employee has been on furlough for an extended period of time, or if they've been off on long-term sick, where an employer can justify the employee hasn't been able to work to assess their capabilities. If this is the case, there does still need to be clear communication on the reasons for the extension and how and when this will be addressed. And then I think this is the final question we've had in prior to today's session. So an employee has been with us for 5 years, is being promoted into a management role. Can I put them on probation? So this is a question I've come across many times, which arises following internal moves or promotions. It's important to remember an employee with more than 2 years continuous service does have protection against unfair dismissal and therefore cannot be put on a probationary period in the same way as new external recruits. I always advise that probation period is linked to a company rather than an individual role, and therefore once an employee has passed their probation period, they have passed the probation period with that company, regardless of any future internal moves or promotions. However, although existing employees cannot be put on probation in the same way new starters, this doesn't mean that their development and performance in a new role cannot be monitored. It's still important that you are setting goals, objectives, and expectations for all employees within new roles, and then monitoring their performance over a review period. The only other variation in this area would be if an employee is starting a new role following redundancy process, where employees are redeployed following redundancy. They do have right to a 4-week trial period in a new role for both the employee and the employer to assess if the role is suitable. And that is it then for today's session. Thank you for attending today's webinar and your attention. I do hope that it has been useful. If you do need any further support, if you have any questions, or if you want to run anything past me following what we've gone through today, then my email address and mobile number are currently up on the screen now. And remember, Clover HR can support with implementing and reviewing probation review periods. So please do get in touch if you would like any further support, and thank you.